Thank you so much, Jacob. Oh, I don't know what to say, and hopefully I can stand up to all the promises that you just made now to the people, and hopefully nobody has to leave this session disappointed that I could not stand up for what you are promising here. So yeah, for me it's a real pleasure. So I really appreciate being invited by Jacob to talk about a topic I feel is really important, and it probably doesn't really look at a first glance much related to my deep profession, which is software development. But basically, I think if you look a little bit more behind the scenes, that's probably one of the core success factors I see for being successful in developing software, or even broader, in creating great products. And we will talk about requirements, and maybe more specifically, why I believe that requirements destroy agility. So I think I can probably very quickly just explain why I decided to give this talk. And then I would love to hear, why are you even here? So what's your motivation of being here? And I have prepared something small that you can interact easily on those kind of questions. So I think if when I started really working in an agile way, really embracing agility, that was a time when I went through some disappointments. I think the situation that really triggered me to become more agile, or to try to find a better way to do this, was when I actually really was working with a customer on a project. And so we were assembling all their requirements. We even built a small prototype, and then we agreed that's exactly the product they need. And so it took us, I think, 4 months to assemble those requirements. Then it took us another 6 months to implement the product. And then after we finished the implementation and we showed the final product to users, their first response was, okay, I cannot work with this. So that's nothing that is really useful to me. And I was then so disappointed, and so much effort has been invested into gathering those requirements. And that's why I felt motivated to find other better ways. And then over time, I was getting deeper and deeper into Scrum, being a trainer nowadays. And then at some day, I was just thinking back to this situation. And then I realized maybe we should go back more to the basics and to understand what is really differentiating an agile way of approaching new products. And it's probably not so much about all this nitty little details that some people are passionately discussing on social media about, or whatever. So it's really one of the core topics, and that's probably why I will get really passionate and excited at some points during this presentation. So hopefully that's okay with you. So I can quickly share a link here in the chat, and you could also, let me share my other screen here quickly. You can also use your phone to just scan the QR code. You will see in a second here. And there is a quick survey I have prepared, and I would love to just hear, why are you here at this presentation? What's your motivation? And let's see what will be the most responses to this one. we will give people a couple of more minutes to just get onto the system. If you have opened it, just keep it open. There will be a couple of follow-up questions as well. So don't be surprised if you submitted your answer. There will nothing going on your side. I will have to switch us to the next slide, which is probably then just happening when we have finished this quick survey. Okay, so people seem to be already convinced of my theory that requirements destroy agility. They want to just explain it. So at least we have a couple of people that want to see myself embarrassing myself. So that's also okay. Yeah. So people seem also to appreciate your community, Jacob. So that's probably it wouldn't really matter which topic you bring up. They just trust you and will be here. So that's already good. So and let's move on to the next question I have for you, and that is the title basically is why requirements destroy agility. And I would love to hear what defines agility for you. So you can just give a very short word or a quick explanation what you think is the core of agility, what you think really differentiates agility from other topics. Oh, I see already the Agile Manifesto simply. So what is defined here? A flexible approach. Oh yeah, that's also good. So we gain some flexibility, and I think probably Agile is probably another word for flexibility. That's cool. Reacting to change. Yes. Are we be able to react to change? That we probably, in an ideal world, we would even embrace change. Adult capitalism, delivering value to customers and users to make money from it. That's also a nice one. So it's having a focus more on the value. That's really interesting. More people typing. Let's see what we have here. Let's give it a couple of more minutes. Capacity to think and adapt quickly, make decisions effectively. Oh, I like that one about the decisions. Yes. Continuous delivery and be focused on outcome for stakeholders. I'm really passionate about continuous delivery, so I believe there's so much potential in it, and it's a pity to see how many organizations are really missing out on that one. And especially my technical myself is really passionate about how to make it possible from a technical perspective. Close collaboration between parties and quick response to change. Oh yeah, the collaboration, that's really a core part of agility, in my opinion, as well. So it's probably a very different way how we really collaborate, how we bring people together to work towards a shared goal. That's also really awesome. So There's still people typing, so let's wait if you get more responses. And then we'll move on. The capability of adjusting strategies or approaches based on new information or evolving conditions. Oh, that's a nice one. So that is really what, for me, differentiates an iterative approach from an incremental approach. So I see often teams doing just an iterative approach. So that means they still have this big plan and they just cut it into smaller iterations. That's probably not enough to really be agile and really adjusting your approaches and your strategies. I think that is what really makes it an incremental approach. And that's really important here. Let's wait for one more response here, and then we will move on. Encouraging experimentation, learn and innovate faster, turning failures into chances for growth. Oh, that almost sounds to me like the third way of DevOps. Don't know if you know the 3 ways, but that kind of doing experiments and learn from it to boost your innovation, your ability to innovate. That's a cool one. Releasing fast to respond to the market changes with the help of technology. Oh, no limitations. Woo-hoo! And working methodology. Agility is the ability to create and respond to change. It's a way of dealing with and ultimately succeeding in an uncertain and turbulent environment. Cool. So I guess that's probably most of you being here at a session like this would probably be in an uncertain and maybe even in a turbulent environment. That would be my expectation here. Yeah, that are great answers. So that awesome. So let's move on with some topics, because yeah, I guess you are not only here to answer my questions here I have for you. So I think for me, what I could easily combine all those things that I have heard from you is that agility is about maximizing the value and at the same time minimizing the risk. And that's, for me, the beauty of agility, that it's really serving a deeper purpose. It's really helping us to become better in achieving our goals. And yeah, that's why agility is so important for me, and it seems to you as well. So then let's just dig into another part of my title, why requirements destroy agility. So let's first have a closer look what we mean when we talk about requirements. And probably it's worth to just look up in the dictionary what requirement means. And the dictionary says that is something that you must do or something you need. And if it is something that you must do and something you need, then I'm wondering, why should we try a flexible approach? So how do we then react to change if it's clear that we must do those things? Or in other words, why do we even need to work in an agile way if it is clear that we have to do those things, if they are necessary, if they are required? Then that's probably not worth discussing it. It's just we have to do the damn thing. It is more finding ways how can we get those things that are required done as quickly as possible? But that doesn't sound very agile to me. And I deeply believe, and that's my experience from working with various teams and various roles, is that the words that we use are influencing our thinking and our actions. And if we talk about requirements, that will influence how we think about our product backlog, for example, that we will define in a way the actions of our product owner, how we interact with our product owner, how we really see our product owner. And that is why I believe that we should question, is requirement a good term for those things that we have in our product backlog, if we really truly want to be agile? Or should we probably just come up with a better name that we probably have more flexibility in thinking about those things? And that brings me to the last part of my title, and that's why requirements destroy agility. So what's basically the problem? What are some flaws that we see in teams if they treat requirements as real requirements, as if they would be really required? And so first thing I would like to mention here is that requirements encourage the buyer syndrome. So I call it like this, and that's basically the product owner buys features from the developers. So he is the buyer and the developers just deliver. They're just serving their product owner, and they're probably just delivering what is requested from them, because that's the customer is king. And that's probably more the mentality that we see if we think in terms of requirements. So, and piling even more onto this is that requirements, so if it is required, it's a rule, then this puts developers more in an execution role. So they're just executing what's ordered from them. So they're just doing the thing, but they're probably not feeling mandated to have conversation or to question those things. So requirements, in my experience, make things look important even if they only deliver low value. And I've been in so many projects where I had examples like this, where we built something because somebody said this is required, and we just built it. And then afterwards, we found out it's creating very little value. Nobody is really using the feature that we have just implemented with a lot of time. But at the beginning, it was defined as this is required. It is a must-have. And people were not really questioning that. And that probably led to this effect. And then there is a thing that I see frequently, and that's that people, in my opinion, they are just following a myth, or they understand it in a way that I would probably not agree to, and that's that done equals it's finished. And finished in terms of we don't have to touch this thing another time. And that leads that we are over investing in specific functionalities to really get it in a perfect state that we don't have to fix later. And in my opinion, that's not my understanding of done. I love to have a very rough early functionality, very limited functionality, just to gather some feedback, to try how people are reacting to it. Done, in my definition, is that it has to be usable, because the usable enables getting feedback, getting real feedback from real users in real environments. And that is what done means to me. It doesn't mean that we have all the intended functionality finished. It is more, okay, there is at least one piece of functionality in a usable state so that we can gather this kind of feedback. If we work with requirements, what you could frequently see is that it seems that finishing work is more important than achieving something. So we will dig a little bit deeper into this later during the presentation, but this thing that, yeah, it seems that people, developers, are valued by the work they are able to finish. That's probably not the best measure. So we often talk about output versus outcome, and that's exactly this point. And I see that this is emphasized when we talk about requirements. And then requirements minimize our openness to question and change the backlog. So it's just given there, and we just have to work down the whole backlog as quickly and as efficiently as possible. But I think we should be open enough to question, how could we change the product backlog to achieve more, to achieve better goals, to achieve more value. Requirements usually are based on assumptions that we make, but they are at the same time treated as facts. So that's that we don't really question them. And that brings me to my last sticky here. And that's that requirements minimize discussions. And if it's required, why should we even discuss it? So to me, to summarize this is requirements feel pretty much like best practices. And to be honest, I hate best practices in a complex environment for complex situations. I think best practices are a disservice, because best practices, they are describing that there is a best way to do things. And once we found this best way, we don't have to question it. We just have to do it. And that seems to be very similar with how I see people treating requirements, that, yeah, once they are described, we have just to do it. So that's how to go. Okay, so that's a lot of ranting I did here. Probably I would just hope that you can relate to these things, and that you probably agree that there are some flaws with requirements. We're a small enough group. Maybe anyone wants to become on mute and just share. Do you experience any of those things with requirements, and can you relate it to how we treat our backlog items?
So I'm afraid I experience almost all of this stuff. I'm afraid it's similar in every country, probably.
Cool. Anyone else? So participants can unmute, Jacob, right?
Yes, they can.
They can unmute themselves, so don't be shy. Okay, nobody wants to share. So I hope you're just shy, and it's not that you cannot relate to the points here. So yeah, then probably it's enough from renting and the question would be then, how could we do better? And to be honest, I said maybe we should consider renaming the thing, not call it a requirement anymore. So I personally love to talk about improvement opportunities. That's how I see our items on the product backlog. But to be honest, just renaming it and not using the word requirement anymore, that probably will not solve those kind of issues, and it will probably not be enough. So let's dig into some things that I believe they are important to be better with those challenges, with those flaws I just mentioned. And the first thing I believe deeply is that we need more openness and especially creativity. And I see so many organizations where creativity happens in marketing and people who do design, but people that are more technical, building a software product or any other kind of product, I think creativity is nothing I would see on a job description for a software developer. Okay, we would love you to have creativity or to be able to be creative. And that's a pity, I find, because this kind of creativity for me is a really core source. And I have had so many situations. So I recently was working on a project, and so we were trying just to gather data out of a system where we didn't have a proper API to retain the data. And so the team together was discussing various options and trying various things. And I was at this point when I would say, okay, I give up. There's no way that we can gather the data out of the system without asking them to build an API that allows us to extract the data from the system. And then one of my teammates just said, okay, I have one more idea. So let me try one more thing. And what should I say? This thing did the trick. It saved us so much time. It really enabled us to build the solution, build the product just based on the creativity of this person, because he was able to just think about one more option. And it was really awesome to see how this really enabled this. And I'm wondering, did you have similar situations where you felt that with creativity you could solve a problem, or with creativity you found a much better way to increase the value of your product, and where you felt that this kind of openness and creativity was a game changer? Can you share any stories that you had in this direction?
Guys, not everybody at once.
Maybe I can share, but not a very specific story, but I remember times when working with IT, giving them requirements, they were making solutions knowing that it won't function, but didn't let know others that they see some problems. Fortunately, it changed, and now people are more creative, are just sharing the knowledge, the experiences, they likes what they like or not, and that makes the work more, just even leads to a success more than to fitting some requirements that maybe the business owner wasn't so well, he had something else in the mind, what he was expecting, but they did it to the rule and not to what was the goal of the project.
Wow, that's cool, Bea. Thanks so much for sharing this. And yeah, I really Oh, that's so awesome for me that you really tied it back to the requirements. And that's exactly, I think, my core message here, how you treat those things that you ask your developers for. If they feel it's a requirement, they're just building it. And as you just described in your story, this will probably prevent them bringing their creativity into finding a better solution. And yeah, it seems that changing this really made a big difference for you. Thanks so much for sharing this. Anyone else?
So maybe I will share. Maybe it sounds a little strange, but there is a different type of football, this American type of that. So actually, I was a Scrum Master in in software team who was creating application for football players, like LinkedIn, but for football players. And actually, it was amazing that we as a team decided to go to actually see the real match. And after that, team had a lot of new ideas. And actually, we had an idea to repeat refinement of few items because they had new ideas around it. So they decided to do it a little bit when they get more familiar with this ball. So that's my story.
Cool. Thanks for sharing, Jacob. That's awesome. Okay. So let's move on. And I think that brings us almost immediately to the question, okay, how do we treat our product backlog? And so I'm sometimes, so I also do some consulting around Azure DevOps. It's a Microsoft product that allows people to organize product backlogs and version control, build management, blah, 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 all those kind of things. But yeah, so what I find sometimes is that people approach me and say, okay, we are having problems managing our product backlog accordingly. So could you just come by and help us to understand how we could use the tool more properly to manage our product backlog? And then almost always when I arrive there and have a first look at their product backlog, I'm shocked. And so how would you, with whatever tool you're using, manage more than 1,586 items on your product backlog? So I would argue there is no tool that is really helping you with that problem. The problem is not the tool, or the solution is not the tool. The solution is that you should probably rethink how you treat your product backlog, how you see your product backlog. And I think there it is that it's just a place where you collect all things that you could potentially do to your product at any point of time. But that is then a very different way how I would see to treat a product backlog in a way that we have a very clear idea about how can we improve the value of our product. And we had this point before where we just do some experiments where we see how it goes, and then from there we make the next decisions. So if you have so many items on your product backlog, then you almost automatically will end up in a situation where it's the question is more, how can we get all those items that are in our product backlog done? You will not have enough time to really consider and become creative to decide how can you increase the value of your product. So I have been in situations where developers just block any discussion of creating new ideas because their argument is there is already more in the product backlog that we could possibly do. So what's the purpose of adding more ideas to this product backlog? A very strange thing I also see with some teams is that I ask, okay, how many items of your product backlog are you able to close per sprint? And they say probably 15. And how many items are added at the same period of time to your product backlog? That's probably 25. So you can already see where this is going. So that's not a very sustainable way. And I deeply believe that we should rethink how we treat our product backlog. It should be just be focused on the next things that we want to do, where we believe this will increase the value. And then we should have the opportunity to reevaluate our situations, take into account the new learnings that we have to add new things to our product backlog. And in my experience, that works so much more easier if you have just a very short product backlog and you are open enough to say, okay, we have just worked for another 1 or 2 sprints on our product backlog. So let's just discuss what should be the next most important things that we want to add to our product backlog. How can we increase the value? And with this, I think we will probably then also rethink the accountability of our product owner. Then probably the product owner will have more influence on how to shape the value of the product than just being a scribe, a person that just collects all the ideas from the various stakeholders and puts them into the product backlog. I would envision there a very different type of a product owner than just let the developers work on things that somebody else told the product owner that this is important and it should be done. That doesn't really sound like the value maximizer, how we love to describe a product owner. Any questions or comments so far? If not, then
I must tell you, Thomas, that I just looked at your slides. Oh, sorry, I interrupted your question.
No, I just wanted to say that no, clear for now.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing the feedback. And Jacob, thanks for sharing feedback about the slides.
Yeah, I'm really envy because I can't drawing at all.
That's the easy part, but yeah, I like this traditional approach. And yeah, so just how we just discussed the product, or I really like the idea of hypothesis-driven development or hypothesis-driven development, depending if you prefer more English or American English. So the idea here is that we accept that our product owner does not know exactly what our users really need, because our users often don't really know what they really need. And once we have accepted this as a fact, then we can treat our items on our product backlog differently. So we just accept that a lot of those things are based on assumptions. So we make some assumptions that if we do this and this change, that will increase the value of our product. Our users will appreciate this change. It will enable them to do things they're not able to do today, whatever you could think of. But then it becomes more like, okay, it's a bet that we're making. And you know, how would you do a bet? The amount of money you will put on a bet, it will probably depend pretty much on the uncertainty that comes with it. So if you have high level of uncertainty, you probably try to bet very little money. If you are more confident about that this will be the right thing to do, then probably you bet more money on it. And just envision each product backlog item will be this kind of a bet. So if you are uncertain, you want to shape it small, to say, okay, let's build a very small thing just to validate if the hypothesis behind this thing that we are going to build are true or not. So you're running an experiment to learn more and then make a decision if you want to invest more into this or not. And the more uncertainty you have, the smaller you want to slice your experiments, or in other words, the smaller you want to slice your product backlog items, because that will then hopefully allow you just to gather some empirical data, some insights, and based on those insights, you can make a more informed decision of how to proceed, how to go from here to invest more into this direction, or just to change your direction slightly, or even stop investing in this area and find another area where you could do more kind of investment. Again, if we talk about requirements, our expectation is that the product owner knows what our users need. That's how we would define requirements. The product owner says it's requirements and we trust the person. So that's the reason why we are just building it. So there is probably, we are ignoring the uncertainty that still is part of this requirements. And that's what hypothesis-driven development, in my opinion, has as a big advantage, is that we really acknowledge this uncertainty and try to find ways how we can deal with the uncertainty instead of ignoring it. Does maybe anyone have an example where you should probably better treat something as an hypothesis, and where probably you built something that turned out to be based on quality assumptions, or maybe a success story where you said, okay, we did this kind of experimentation and it worked great. Any stories you can share?
Okay, I've got one. It's most likely not the perfect one, but well, basically once we had to build a complex kind of chart based on the real-time data. So we were asked to build that, and the data we received from like a streaming subscription, right? So even though for visualization purposes we only needed a static data or data points. So what we did, we ended up using the snapshot of the data. So it hasn't been the optimal solution for sure, but it certainly made the process faster. So we did that, and no one used that chart. So yeah, I guess that's the good example, even if we failed in a sense, right?
Yeah, and I would argue probably it didn't really fail because you learned early enough and you learned quickly. So thanks, Mark, for sharing the story. So that's really cool. I think I have a similar story here, or probably two stories I can share. The one was that a user was requesting, I need a functionality basically to print out those things here. And so the team was really deeply engaged with the user, and they came up with a printer configuration. There were some crazy things they had to consider and some very special demands. So a lot of effort went into this printing functionality there. And then we set up some telemetry data to monitor how frequently is this functionality used. And it turned out it's used almost zero. There was almost zero usage. And then we started interviewing other users, and they said, oh, there's a branding feature I didn't know, so I don't really bother. What I usually do is I use this PDF export, and then that's perfectly fine for me. And they just then print the PDF file. So that's perfectly fine for me. And so here, a lot of effort went into implementing this functionality. So it's quite the opposite of your story, Mark, that we wasted a lot of time and then very late found out that people are not really using our functionality. Another example is that I was part of a team and we were creating an app for craftsmen, and so mobile app. And so our assumption here was that those craftsmen, you know, they work in rough environments, being out on the construction site. So our assumption was that they will not use expensive iPhones. They probably, all of them will have way cheaper Android phones. So our assumption was that it should be good enough to just support Android. And so we've built a very first small MVP. So it was in our first sprint. And then we reached out to real customers. And guess what? 6 out of the 6 first customers that we were interviewing about the product, 6 of them had an iPhone. So again, our assumptions were wrong. And that showed to me again how risky those assumptions are, because we could just build the wrong thing. We can just put the wrong bet, and put a lot of money on this bet. And that's why I believe we have to really accept this kind of uncertainty and treat our requirements not as requirements, but more like, okay, that's a bet, and let's do an experiment to learn from it. So let's go to another slide on our AHA slides. So I will probably switch over to my other screen here again. So if you are already on AHA slides and you have answered the first question, you should already see this one. So if you're not, you can just enter it by using the link from the chat or using the QR code here. And I would love to hear from you, how frequently are you interacting with real users of your product? And for me, there's a difference between users and customers. So users are the people that really actually use your product. And I would love to see how frequently people are interacting with their users here. Okay, so it seems we have only two options here, either once a week or once a month. So the other options seem not to be. Oh no, we have never. That's
interesting.
So thanks for going into this. And yeah, I think that this is another really important thing. And for me, it is all about user empathy. And I think I heard this comment earlier from you, Jacob, to see, okay, we want to really understand our users. We want to understand their needs. We want to understand the environment they are in when they use our product. We want to really see, are they probably, I had one situation where we created a really nice looking graphical user interface with touch interactions. And then finally we found out that people, they're supposed to use this app during their work, they have to wear gloves. So it was really hard for them to really hit those small, nice looking buttons and things that we have created there. So it was just not usable for them. So this kind of user empathy, really having the opportunity to interact with your real users, to understand what works well for them, how you could even help them in a better way, that's a core thing in my opinion. And that's why I find it a pity that a lot of organizations say, okay, we try to shield our developers from real users. So we probably have people from sales or whatever talk to our users. Maybe if you're lucky, your product owner is talking to real users, but I rarely see that developers really have an opportunity to interact with real users, which I personally find a real pity. I once worked with this organization and they told me that they applied this rule that once for 1 day every month, each developer has to be in charge for hotline support. So they're helping out their hotline support team, and they have to answer phone calls from angry customers and things like this. And obviously the developers were first not really excited about this change in rules, but in hindsight, they had to admit that it helped really increase the quality of their product. So it really made a difference, because I think it will help to create a very different level of empathy. If you had an angry customer on the phone really complaining about what's not working greatly here, and that was really interesting for me to just hear. Another thing I had, probably a not so positive story, was that I was with a team and we created some software to control robots. And so, yeah, we're building this system, and then we had some releases, and then obviously, like it is with software, there were some bugs, some problems. But we felt very proud that we were able to really quickly respond to all the bug reports that we received. So it took us, I think, in an average, it took us less than a day to provide a fixed version of the product. And we felt, oh, we are doing pretty good with this. And then at some day, one of the developers was invited over to be part of a rollout of our software in a factory. And then this developer just realized that they had actually to close down the whole factory for this time slot to just provide or to roll out our release. So they had a time frame of a couple of hours to roll out the release, and what should I say? Sorry, the rollout went wrong. So there was a problem, and just fixing this problem within a day didn't really help, because they missed this opportunity window. So they had to roll back to the old version, continue working with it, and then waiting for another time frame, for another time window in a couple of months to try the next approach. And really being part of this, really feeling this pain that changed how the whole team really perceived quality. And over the next couple of months, we changed a lot of things, and I think we really changed the quality of our product here. Do you have any stories that you want to share about user empathy, how you were able to create it, how it helped you, or probably how you felt that it was missed in some situations you had? No stories for this? Okay.
So
I
maybe
have
I
one
have.
story
Sorry.
more for experiment maybe.
Okay.
I'm working in the financial area, so we were looking at the competence at the other companies, other banks. We were thinking, okay, we need to add some more value to our products, to the banking account. So maybe the rewards, maybe the medical services, etc., etc. And checking it with the clients, we were quite surprised because many clients said, no, we are expecting banking services, nothing more. I don't connect a bank with financial services, or I don't want, if I want a reward, I go for retail shops or that they have their own reward systems. So it was like completely changing the idea how it should work. However, it is still difficult seeing other companies, other banks doing such things. If you just listen to customers, to the users, you might not be right. So it's difficult. If looking in the market, you can have other impression, and keeping to the users' feedback.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing this story, Beat. That's really an interesting point that you're making here. And I think that's why I would opt for user empathy. I agree with you that you will probably get into trouble if you try to build and only build what your clients are requesting. I think user empathy for me is a little bit more into the direction that we want to understand our users, that we make good decisions about the future of our product. But I feel the same challenge that you were describing, how to balance this to say, okay, do we really understand our users good enough that we can even make changes to the product they probably don't like first? So I was engaged with Microsoft Product Group for a product. And at some point, it was just an on-premise product at this point in time. And they decided to change it to a cloud product. And back then, I was really disappointed because I said, well, why are you wasting so much time with converting this to a cloud product? Just get the on-premise product to do things right and invest more in this. So I was really angry about them that they decided to invest in a cloud strategy. In hindsight, I have to admit it was absolutely the right thing to do. It was perfect. It was, if they would have followed just my advice as a user, that would be a failure. And I could not agree more, Beat, that this is a real challenge. I feel to find this balance to say, okay, we want to listen to our users, but at the same time, not just building what they want, because we will miss out on some opportunities otherwise.
Okay, one more example for user empathy. We rebuilt a process of selling product, checking with our advisors, bank advisors, what steps they need to do, how should they, what they need to proceed, and they had like make a 45 screens, passed through 47 screens, and seeing the process, what is necessary, what is regulatory requirement, etc., etc. We made a process of 8 steps, so only 8 screens that passes the bank advisor to sell a product. So it was a great success. But of course, it was made in cooperation with different people from branches, restructuring the process and just seeing what is the most important and what is crucial. So I think it was a very good experience to see that you can simplify things and it still works, and even works much better. Don't frustrate the the employer or the client waiting for the sell for having a bank account.
Absolutely. Wow, that's another awesome story. And yeah, I was already thinking in your first story a little bit that sometimes less is more. So sometimes probably people appreciate more simplification, simplified usage. And sometimes I see too many organizations just thinking we could make our customers happy by adding more and more features. Sometimes just removing features or simplifying functionality is probably creating even more value. Thank you so much. That's really awesome. Okay, so let's move on a bit. I think what we should try to achieve is not to try to work down as many items from our product backlog as possible. I really love the idea of goal-driven planning. And for me, that is that we define what we want to achieve, that we define our goals that we want to achieve, and then use the creativity of the developers, of the product owner, of our stakeholders to find what is the most efficient way, what's the most effective way to achieve that goals. So that leaves us still a lot of flexibility, that leaves a lot of room for creativity if we just define the goals that we want to achieve. And for me, that is really important, important difference, because then it's not about getting work done, but it's more about achieving things. And that also goes pretty much in how do we measure our developer productivity, the productivity of our team. How do we measure this? And I feel that a lot of organizations are using whatever kind of measurement that is putting a lot of emphasis in getting work done as quickly, as much as possible. And they are probably less focusing on how are we really achieving this kind of goals. And I have been working with a lot of development teams where I had the impression that they were stressing out themselves and not taking enough time to think about, are there other options? Could we probably achieve the goal with a simplified solution? Is there a shortcut that we can take? Like what was shared in a previous story, can we just build a very simplified first version just to try out this kind of things? So all this kind of conversations are not happening because people are just busy. So a lot of organizations are optimizing for utilization. So they want to get out as much done work as possible from their teams. That's their measure of success. And nobody is really caring about what we are really achieving with that. And for me, that is basically really leading into this idea of time-driven versus impact-driven. And for me, I would say that a lot of people are way too much overemphasizing the correlation between time and impact that we can achieve. I trust that every one of you can remember a situation where you said that the time didn't correlate at all with what you just achieved. So I can remember situations where just to do a very small change, to build something that is very small, it took me ages to implement it because I was just struggling with some problems, some expected things. And in the end, looking back, I was really disappointed because in hindsight, I would have to admit that this small improvement was never worth the time I just invested, but I was so tunneled by just getting the job done. On the other hand, I can also remember situations where just in the matter of seconds, I just had a great idea. I really made a big impact to the product. So that was a huge improvement with a very, very little time investment. And on the other hand, with huge time investment, very small or almost no significant impact to the product. And I think we are overestimating this correlation between time and impact that we are creating here. Any stories that you can share about this correlation where you had situations where you, with very little time investment, achieved something significant, or the other way around?
I'm just thinking loudly. Isn't it a matter of luck sometimes, just, or luck perhaps is not the best word, but well, I mean, that's definitely true, but at the same time, it's not true, right? because
So you mean it's hard to influence it?
Yeah. I mean I mean, it's not always like that, right? And definitely, I can think about situations that we invested a lot of time and effort and talent, and it was worth it, right? I mean, we did something, right? And of course, I've got plenty examples that the small changes was like that, right? Like the spark that.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It sounds great. I agree. It's a great slide, but
Yeah. And I really love that. I probably should have said this at the beginning of the session. I love if we have kind of a controversial discussion about some of the topics. So I usually don't like it if you just agree to everything that I present here, because that's just boring, and that's not true that I know everything. So Mark, thanks for bringing up also a critical perspective to this. And at the same time, I completely agree with you. So I think that the point I try to make here is not necessarily that I know a way how you could control this, that you could always achieve big things with very little time investment. If I would know the recipe to do that, wow, that will be, then I probably wouldn't have any worries about my future. But unfortunately, I don't know. I think the point I try to make here is, why are people then so obsessed about time estimates? if we know sometimes it just takes very long and sometimes it goes way faster than we expected. So why are they really putting so much energy into trying to get those time estimates right? Why are we so focused on measuring times that it takes? Why aren't people more focused on what is the impact that we can create here, and how can we find the best way to create this impact? And sometimes it will take a lot of time to achieve the impact. That's just a matter of fact. But then it should be a deliberate decision that we say, is it worth to do the investment here right away? Or should we probably invest our time somewhere else? And again, if I get back to the requirements, I feel if we treat requirements as requirements, then probably we don't have this kind of conversation frequently enough. It's probably more that we are so focused on getting the work done in as little time as possible. So this famous phrase, do twice the work in half the time, that is not what I'm intentioning here. I would say my intention would be create twice the value in half the time. That probably makes more sense to me than just talk about getting work done.
I have a question about the time estimates. Yeah, I also agree that yes, there is a tendency for people to focus on the time. There's always that, okay, to do the planning, we need to do estimation and we try to get it accurate. But I also feel that the time estimates will help when you have dependencies, and so that when you work in a release train kind of way, then then you have that flow that, okay, so this, especially when there is a dependency that other people are waiting on, because yeah, I know that if we have, of course it would be good if we focus on the impact, but that is if you have like kind of like a standalone product. I think that would be more, I don't know, not impacting other teams. I don't know,
Yeah.
that was just my thinking. But of course, like, not an estimate is good, but probably not focus too much, like spending so much time to just estimate the size of this story, for example. I think that's such a waste of time.
Yeah, and it's probably, in my experience, it's even worse. But thanks again, Diana, for this comment. I really appreciate it, and it's a really important point that you're making here. And I probably have a very quick thought on this dependencies that you are mentioning, but probably that's not really invalidating your full point. But I think that organizations sometimes are way too much focused on managing those dependencies, and trying to get accurate estimates is one way, in my opinion, to manage those dependencies. I feel that a lot of teams and organizations are or could benefit from questioning more, how could we minimize those dependencies? How can we reduce them? How can we probably change our organizational structure? How can we change the structure of our products to reduce these dependencies? And with that, I'm not saying that, as I said, your point will be completely invalidated with this. So still, it probably helps to improve the situation a little bit, but there's still situations left where I agree that we need to plan some timings. And even if it's about, okay, when can we start printing some marketing materials because we need some free time to plan this accordingly, and will it then be aligned or synced timing wise with really having this functionality ready? So I would not say estimation is a complete waste of time and you should never do it. There might be situations, but I feel that estimation for the small things that we have in our product backlog, these are probably the things where I would question the value. And that brings me back to the goal-driven planning. So I would probably say then this different teams come together that have this kind of dependency, and they together agree on a goal. At this point in time, we want to achieve this and that. And then we still need to find some flexibility that we can really match this point in time. And if unforeseeable things happen, if we have challenges that nobody could foresee, which is reality, it's just reality, I would say, then we need some flexibility to react to this. And I see too many organizations saying, okay, then our developers should just work harder or faster. And I'm always wondering, how could, and bear with me, probably you're in a different domain, I'm a software developer, but how could software developers just develop faster? I could not really envision how this would look like. So type faster or think faster. The only option I see as realistic to speed up development efforts is to use our creativity to find simpler solutions that still allow us to achieve the goal. And how we can achieve the goal, there are different, let's say, different flaws of it. So like you could stay in a 2-star, very cheap budget hotel, or you can just have a night in a 5-star plus luxury hotel. Both will help you to achieve the same goal, which is probably to have a bed for the night and have an option to shower in the morning. But there are different variations of the result. And I think we need this kind of flexibility also when we build our products, that we focus more on the goals that we want to achieve and find ways that matches the time frames and the demands that we have, for example, based on this kind of dependencies you were mentioning. And this needs creativity on one hand, and on the other hand, it needs that we don't treat our items on the product backlog as requirements, because then it means we have to implement this 50 product backlog items within this time frame. That doesn't leave much flexibility. If we consider, for example, talking in Scrum terms, a product goal that we want to achieve in a specific time frame, that still gives us way more flexibility in the details that we can shape there. So I'm always talking a lot, so I'm not sure if that makes any sense to you, Diana.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I definitely agree. The part which you said, yeah, reducing the structure in the product to reduce these dependencies. Yes, and also, yeah, the part where you mentioned that, yeah, we definitely, the team that have the dependencies, they need to agree on the goal and also have that flexibility. Yeah, because all the time something definitely will happen and it's unexpected. So then we need to like come up, I don't know, like another like plan or just embrace it rather than yeah, rather than asking the developers to work harder. Exactly. I do see that that happening a lot, actually.
Cool. Thank you for sharing this. Thank you so much. Any other questions or comments?
So just remark about time-driven. If you need some changes in product because of business needs, because of I don't know, law changes. So when we have some deadlines, it means that time-driven is necessary, because we cannot tell to our business that we will make great changes, but later, because we just lose money.
Yeah, and I completely agree with this. And I think there is not always, but I think there is sometimes an opportunity to even use some kind of flexibility if you really define this as a goal. So what you just mentioned, that there are some law changes or some regularities that you have to apply with. If you define this as a goal, I have witnessed a couple of teams that found creative ways to find shortcuts to meet those demands and meet the timeline to this. And at least they were probably not perfectly happy with their solution, but at least it allowed them to meet this kind of timeline. And then they probably invested more into this at a later point in time, but it prevented them to be out of the law, to not being able to sell their product, or their users continue using their product, whatever. So I just think that there might be situations where we could just, with a different mindset, find better solutions to those kind of scenarios. Does that make sense, Yuri?
Yeah, makes sense.
Cool. So that's basically all that I have, and I would like to hear, are there any general questions about the topic, anything that you would like to pick up, or any feedback about the session, about what I had to share?
I would like you to ask you to just go deeper for this topic, the requirements kill agility, or because when we think about a project, we think about, of course, a problem, people that would like a solution, but for this you make requirements for the project. So I think it's very difficult in a company that is quite structured. No, don't stop telling about requirements. So for me, it's a challenge how to put it into action.
Yeah, and I completely can relate to this. And I think that is probably the big challenge here with agility and with a lot of agile transformation, because it needs that you change the mindset. So I think what you could at least try is to challenge are the requirements, the things that we call requirements, are they really required in terms of all the flaws that I described, all the things that we just build it, that we don't question it, that we don't use enough creativity. And just hopefully the presentation gave you some ideas, some thoughts, how you can explain the options, the other options that you would miss out on, the benefits from agility that you would miss out if you treat those items on your product backlog as being required. And I've worked with organizations where it just helped to rename the thing. So it sparked some conversations that people ask, okay, why are you now renaming it? Why are we no longer calling it requirements? And that gave me an opportunity to have this conversation, to really question, okay, what would happen if we really treat this differently? What would it open as opportunities? Did we probably really have situations in the past where we just built the things that were on the product backlog without really questioning it enough, without thinking, are there cheaper options? Are there shortcuts that we can take? Could we probably question what's the real benefit, the value, the goal that we want to achieve with that, and then come up with other options that we can achieve the same goal for our users?
So when I could suggest, if we go from requirements to use cases and user stories with acceptance criteria, then we are talking about similar things, but in other way.
Yes, and I think I think that user stories are a really great way of describing what we should do, and they will open up enough room for this kind of discussion. I'm really advocating for here. Just I see that there are unfortunately a lot of scenarios where people just misuse user stories. So I think if you are in a situation where you don't use user stories today, that could exactly be this trigger for the conversation and rethink how you treat those things. But I think I agree completely that just renaming the items on your product backlog to something different, that will not do the trick for you. It could be an option that you can start a conversation and really make people really think about the whole thing that we have discussed about in the last 1.5 hours. How can we really benefit from being agile, and how do we have to change the mindset? So it can be just a trigger, but we will have to change how people think about those things.
And what was the, oh, sorry.
I just wanted to thank you. It's quite insightful to just rename it, even if you don't finally rename it and everyone will use it other word, but just to search for another solutions, shortcuts, etc. What you said. Because if not, sometimes it's like, okay, this requirement is accepted by the board or by some group of steering committee, etc. So we cannot change it. And it's like, you know, something that is not questioned anymore. So, and I think it's many times it needs to be questioned and search for another solution. So thank you. I think it will help me to just think about it better.
Cool. Thanks for the feedback, PR.
And what was the phrase that you came up with that worked for you?
So, and that's very not a best practice or whatever, but I like to think about it as improvement opportunities.
Right.
Because and one thing is that all those things that we have on the product backlog should help us to improve the value of our product. And we should see them as different opportunities. And if you have multiple opportunities at your hand, you will question, okay, what will be the one that I put my bet on first? And then I probably set a small bet on this one, and then I will probably reconsider, will I continue going with this opportunity, or after having learned something new, is probably another opportunity more attractive to me? So that's I think that the thinking that I would like to see here, and that's probably why I came up with this term, but I think how you name it, that doesn't really matter. Then again, the important thing is just to trigger a conversation to rethink how you treat it.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good explanation. I thought about something like needs or desires, but they're too generic, I guess. Yours better. Yours is better. Cool.
Oh, thank you.
One question, Thomas. How many times did you do by yourself or your team something that is exactly what is in requirement described, but the client or user told you, but you didn't do this? And when you asked him or told him that it wasn't in requirements, you received the answer or question, aber es ist selbstverständlich.
Yeah, and it's I have been in this situation very frequently, but I will have to admit that most of the situation is when I teach my favorite training, which is that we build software during the training, and I play the role as a product owner. And I have this situation you just describing here frequently with those teams, but I had it also in real teams and real environments. And I'm always frustrated about this kind of very fruitless discussions, because in my opinion, that's the core of Agile, is that we see what we have created so far just as a first step. So there shouldn't be any problem with just picking up where we are currently and then just add what the customer still needs. I understand there are some financial models where it really makes a huge difference if that was implemented as described or not. And that is if you have a fixed price for a specific functionality. And
Yeah,
then
exactly.
you have exactly this kind of conversation.
Thank you.
Thanks for bringing this up.
I have a feeling that the challenge here is that it's sometimes hard to measure if the simple solution really brings the same value as the more complicated one, I would say, because it's so hard to measure value, especially when talking about some new product that it's not bringing money yet, but it's about experimentation, right? How to know that this brings value, or the simplest solution bring value.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree that this is a challenge. Personally, I'm a huge fan of using telemetry data to get insights how your users are actually using your system. So I've been building a product for a group of people that actively asked for this kind of product. And then I created the product, I put it out there, made it available to the users, and I had telemetry data in there. And then I had to realize that for 6 months, nobody was actually using the product. So that was probably a negative experience I had with telemetry data, but creating this kind of insights, I think that is still core for me. But I agree that it is not that you can measure value in a specific number or whatever, but at least you can create a better understanding of how your users are using your product, and hopefully that allows you to draw some conclusions about the value that something created. Does that help?
Yeah, I agree. I just think that, the fact that it's so much easier, for example, to measure productivity in a way that we measure time, there's a reason why you do it, right? Because
Yes.
it's just possible, easily possible to have those data. And we are lazy, and that's why we are focusing on that and not on important stuff. But yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with this statement. Okay, so Jacob just told me I should try to stay under 2 hours for the session. So
Still, we have some time. It's not a problem.
Sometimes, so
Feel
I
free
don't
to continue if you like, of course.
Yeah, so I don't want to cut you short. And just don't be shy to ask more questions. I have just in the meantime 2 more questions here on my survey, and I would like to know what is your or what are your key takeaways from this presentation so far? And just take the time to type it in there. And at the same time, if you have any other questions or comments or things you'd like to discuss, just go on mute and let's discuss it.
Oh, there are also comments on chat. Thank you so much for the meeting. Love the live/manually made presentation. I've been attending online meetings for like 3 years and haven't seen such even once. So cool, old school and hard.
Oh, thank you so much
for your presentation. It definitely changed the way I think about requirements and my product backlog. Also, I like the creative way to present it with post-it notes with real handwriting and drawing. So I have the same feeling, I must admit it.
That's really cool. Thank you so much for this kind words. Oh, so it seems somebody saw value in the flaws of requirements. That's cool. Yeah, great. Any other things that you take away from this presentation where you feel it was worth or not worth spending the time? Oh, yeah, the bad thing. That's cool. That's sometimes a thing that I like to ask product owners or ask stakeholders to say, okay, they ask to estimate how much it will take, and I would probably return and ask them, okay, how much money would you bet that this will be a significant improvement to our product? And that's already opening very interesting conversations and starting sometimes that it feels very natural to expect developers to estimate effort, but at the same time, stakeholders feel very uncomfortable to estimate value. And the bet is just another way to really ask for an estimate of value. Yeah, and I agree with this thing that it is probably not a natural thing that will develop, that your developers will become creative instantly after you rename your requirements to something else. That might need some work and time and coaching, but I have worked with really amazing teams. I have worked with really amazing developers, and it was so great what they were able to achieve. So recently, at the beginning of this year, I was working with a team, and they created a new mobile app product, and they had 2-week sprints. And not only did they achieve their sprint goal and delivering a new version of the app every 2 weeks, even in the first sprint, but they had the first increment ready, which allowed first experimentations after day 1. And it was really awesome to see how this team really approached this. That was really amazing. Oh yeah, that's cool. If I was able to just trigger some thoughts on you, that's probably the most that I can hope for. That, yeah, that you probably, it triggered some thoughts in you. And yeah, to probably, I also enjoy this, that sessions like this, even if I present or if I'm an attendee to this, it helps me to recharge my own agile mojo, so to say, that I probably get more energized to fight for things like it is described here in one of those cards. Yeah. Very cool.
I didn't take a screenshot of this flows of requirements on the beginning. That's a pity, but I had some initial thoughts when I joined here. So I've got like 2. First was that I many times, well, quite a lot of times, I've seen that good ideas getting lost simply because it was expected from one person to write the comprehensive kind of stuff, right? And it's impossible to do that. But on the flip side, I also have seen countless times when or how the absence of requirements became a very convenient excuse for pretty talented people to to slack off and basically feel fine about that, right? Because what you need is solid requirements, and I don't blame them, not for sure. But then, yeah, you answer that with your slide about the creativity and openness, right? Or basically this statement that requirements minimize discussions. I guess that was the exact phrase. So yeah, that's very good.
Yeah, probably a brief comment about the screenshot. So there will be a recording of the video, so you have access to it. But maybe question to Jacob, if there is a way that we can share some files with the attendees, I could just send you a presentation with photos of those slides.
If you could just create some catalog on Drive and just give me a link, and I will share it to the community. It's not a problem.
Cool. Yeah, I will do that. And then, Mark, maybe to your point, and I completely agree to that, that there might be situations where people just then go the easy route. And that's why I feel that probably the most important job of a product owner is to create passion about the product in the developers. I deeply believe if the developers are passionate about the product they're building, they are building something that they are proud of, then they will come up with all these good ideas. They will create this creativity. They will find ways to improve the quality if they feel the quality is not where it should be. They will fight more for technical excellence for this improvement if they are really into building a great product. If it feels like they are just in a hamster wheel and it's they just fixing one backlog item after the other, fixing or implementing one requirement after the other, and at the same time, new requirements always arrive. So the question is, why should I really be passionate about this? Why should I really care? And that's, I think, why user empathy and working with goals is so important, because that can create this kind of inspiration and passion within developers.
I completely agree. That has been my experience too.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that it's easy to create this kind of passion. That shouldn't be the message here.
I would also add that it is important to have a space for failure, because always it is repeated that there need to be iteration, that you can fail and again, try again. But in real life, it's all many times it's that there are requirements and you need to meet it. And if you fail, it's a big deal. so people don't feel free to just experiment and
Yes.
to deliver something better.
Yes, absolutely. And that's I mentioned the 3 ways of DevOps, and the third way is exactly about creating a culture of continuous experimentation and learning. And that is, I think, describing exactly what you're just mentioning here, which is hard for some organizations. I completely agree. So I've one last slide with a question here in AHA slides, and just think about a product owner, project manager you have in mind, and just for the purpose of this exercise, assume it's a good friend of you, even if this person might not be. But which advice, after just spending some time together discussing this, which advice would you give this person? So anything that you would tell this person they should probably try, they should consider, they should do? Project is secondary. Oh yeah, that's a good one. Yes. Requirements are hypotheses. Cool. So I think we are at the end of our time box here. So the only thing left to do for me is to thank you all for this lively discussion. So it was really awesome to be part of this. So it was so great to have these questions and the comments that you made, the stories that you shared, also that you brought up different perspectives and challenged my points. So that was really beneficial to me, and I really enjoyed spending the time together with you. So thank you so much for creating this environment for me.
So Thomas, it was an honor to have the guests like you. So I hope we will meet again sometime soon. And what else can I say? It was a pleasure to hear you. And actually, even I'm in this business for something like 14 years, I still learned some stuff from you. So thank you even more for that.
Thank you very much. That's a real honor to hear that you learned something during the session. Cool.